Greetings, friends around the world. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy Channel. Is the International Monetary Fund about to announce a new reserve currency to eliminate the US dollar's dominance as the world's reserve currency? Is this possible? Could it happen in the fall of 2015? Well, there's a financial analyst by the name of Porter Stansberry. He and his company have indicated this may be. So I'd like to read a few things about that and talk about also what the Bible says and see if his predictions have any validity, if they're right, if they will happen, or if maybe it'll happen later. Here's something from Stansberry Research, his company. It says the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is one of the most secretive, powerful organizations in the world. It monitors the financial health of 185 countries. They establish money rules, and they provide bailout assistance for bankrupt companies. And here's something they wrote. And on October 20th of this year, the IMF is expected to announce a reserve currency alternative to the US dollar, which will send hundreds of billions of dollars moving around the world literally overnight. And then they quote somebody by the name of Juan Zarate. He says he helped implement financial sanctions while serving in George W. Bush's Treasury Department. Quote, once the other currency becomes an alternative to the dollar, the rules of the game begin to change. And then they cite Leong Sing Cheong, Assistant Managing Director of a major central bank, and he said that this dollar alternative is likely to transform the financial landscape in the next 5 to 10 years. But this is something that they said back in April. Now, Stansberry Group came out on the 8th of July, 2015, and they've changed it a little bit. It says, and this fall, so instead of sticking to the October 20th date that they had indicated, IMF could announce a reserve currency alternative to the US dollar. They say, in fact, in a June 25th, 2015 Bloomberg article, 68% of economists they surveyed said they believe that this new currency will be adopted. This could send hundreds of billions of dollars moving around the world literally overnight. It's the same basic thing they said before on that part. Now, I will say that Juan Zarate was right with his statement that, quote, once some other currency becomes an alternative to the dollar, the rules of the game begin to change. And that's true. Americans in the United States do not realize how well or how much their standard of living has been and is being subsidized by the fact that the United States dollar is the primary reserve currency in the world. As a matter of fact, the US dollar, as in 2014, about 62.9% of world bank reserves, the reserve currency was the US dollar. So it's more than all other currencies put together, almost more than all of them put together times 2. So is it possible? Is there anything going on to try to change this? Well, actually, yes. The IMF itself would like something other than the US dollar to be the world's primary reserve currency, but the IMF doesn't have the power to determine the world's reserve currency. The banks, the individual countries, they make the decisions, and it's sort of ipso facto just because of what's happened. The US dollar is considered the world's reserve currency, or has become the world's reserve currency. Well, anyway, the IMF, the Europeans, the so-called BRICS nations, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, they all want to see the United States dollar toppled as the world's reserve currency. And in July of 2015, the BRICS had a meeting. Also, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is sort of related, as well as the Eurasian Economic Union, which is more or less an attempt, if you will, to reconstitute parts of the old Soviet Union and maybe beyond, got together in Ufa, Russia, to discuss, amongst other things, more cooperation within the Eurasian region and how to start using their currencies within trade and no longer use the US dollar for trade. What many people do not realize is throughout the whole world, it's not just oil that's priced in dollars. Many international transactions are done in US dollars, which actually helps the United States people, in the short run at least. But the BRICS nations, the SCO nations, many of which are the same, are saying, wait a second, why would you use our own currencies? cut the U.S. out, which hurt the United States financial services sector, but also mean that there's less need for other countries to keep U.S. dollars. If all the U.S. dollars that other countries kept in their banks, etc., and their citizens were keeping U.S. dollars, if they all came back to the United States, we'd have such massive inflation. And the standard of living for many would go down more than most Americans, I think, would imagine. Anyway, as far as what's going on with Eurasia, I thought I'd comment. Somebody sent me an article written by Vladimir Nestorov, and he said, "The emergence of the great Eurasian looming against the background of declining West." Now, this came out on the 11th of July, 2015, by Vladimir Nestorov. He said, "The one superpower dominated the world is becoming a thing of the past right in front of our eyes. Old institutions are in decline. Take the World Trade Organization, the European Union, mired in crises, the degrading Organization of Security and Cooperation of Europe. So far, intense discussions of the United Nations Organization's reform have been nothing but shooting the breeze." Now here's the part you might find interesting. It says, "The United States has already seen its heyday. It's still going strong with its military, but other states are breathing down its neck. China has surpassed the United States in GDP in terms of purchasing power parity. The cooperation of the BRICS members, which I just mentioned before, is on the rise. Shanghai Cooperation Organization is expanding with India and Pakistan on the way. And of course, Greece has been an issue." Vladimir says, "The United States starts to look more like a World War II battleship with a large hole in the hull below the waterline. So the damage," he says, "isn't visible. The ship continues to move as if it's strong with its guns aimed against an enemy. But as time goes on, the battleship is losing speed and starting to slow down. Today, the United States is retreating to leave behind hotbeds of tension and unfinished wars. The conflict in Ukraine, the never-ending war in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and Iraq are in ruins. And that's what the retreat results in. To slow down the degradation of the United States, it's applying to create the TTIP, bringing together the golden bullion states as part of the international financial group. But Europe is gaining strength. The United States is also considering the transatlantic proposal as a way to cut off Europe from Russia and pushing Russia further toward Asia. It says the United States shies away from using the term Cold War in regard to the current psychological and informational standoff, but actually it's waging a war on all fronts. And basically what he's saying is the United States is declining. People don't know it. The Eurasian nations are coming up. On the other hand, not everybody is so sure about what's going on with the Eurasian nations. For example, something from the Foreign Policy Journal said there's nothing about the BRICS New Development Bank which suggests a challenge to international finance or globalization, and basically that they can proceed, but they open the back door for Central Asia, Russia, etc., to do some things for China, but nothing that they want to do is going to challenge the international system, at least according to this particular report, at least at this time. Now, one of the countries that was mentioned was China. And I think this actually has more to do with Porter Stansberry's comments, or his company's comments, that a new alternative to the US dollar will be offered in the fall. And that's because China has been trying to become stronger internationally. And one of the things it's been trying to do is to get its currency, the renminbi yuan, to be part of what the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, calls special drawing rights. And in July of 2014, China issued new rules in the middle of it to try to get involved in the international bond market. And it's been taking unprecedented steps to halt the problem they have with their stock market. And one of the reasons is they want to support the global use of the yuan for inclusion in the IMF's basket of reserve currencies. Winning inclusion in the IMF's so-called special drawing rights basket, or SDR, is a top priority for China's leadership this year and has been spearheaded by the People's Bank over in China. And it's a big step toward trying to get more acceptance of the renminbi yuan. But when I looked at a chart for the world's reserve currencies, the renminbi yuan was grouped under other. It wasn't enough yet. Now, the IMF is going to conduct a review in November of 2015, this fall, on whether or not to add the Chinese currency to its SDR basket. And 70% of votes are likely required to approve this. And maybe that's going to happen. We will see. But even if the Chinese renminbi yuan becomes part of the special drawing rights basket that the IMF has, that's really not yet a replacement for the US dollar. While actions are being taken by many, as I mentioned before, I mentioned the Chinese, the Eurasians, the Indians, Russians, I mentioned Europeans, and actually within the Gulf states as well, in the Middle East, there's a lot of action to try to replace the US dollar. But right now, the reality is the Chinese don't trust the Chinese well enough to do this. The world doesn't trust the Chinese to have everything done this way. Many people think the Europeans keep squabbling amongst themselves, and so that might cause a split. And by the way, the second most used reserve currency of the world is the euro. While there are some efforts to try to replace US dollar, the situation in the world currently, unless some massive disaster happens in the next few months, it's not possible that the US dollar is going to be dropped as the world's reserve currency. At least not then. I do think it will happen, but not then. And actually, that's one issue that Porter Stansberry has, is sometimes he's made some predictions that just don't quite come out. For example, I ran across this that said in December 14, 2010, he released a video called The End of America, and here's a claim he made. Let me back up and show you that in the simplest terms possible what's going on and why I am so concerned and what I believe will happen in the next 12 months. And it continues with, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency for decades now, so most Americans don't have a clue about what the repercussions are of losing that status. And of course, the US dollar did not lose the world's reserve currency within 12 months of Porter Stansberry doing this. Now, I found something from him that he wrote or published on the 13th of June, 2015. He said, in December 2008, I began warning about the risk that the U.S. could lose world reserve currency status in something he says I termed the end of America. It's worth looking at. So much of what I feared would happen has come true. Well, it's true that the world is looking at replacing the U.S. dollar, but it has not happened yet. And anyway, and on June 15, 2013, he said, today more than 60% of bank reserves around the world are still held in US dollars. Mark my words, in less than a year, the dollar will no longer make up even a majority of these reserves. The end of America isn't coming, it's here. Well, actually, I did check, and from 2013 to 2014, what I saw published in terms of World Bank reserves is instead of decreasing, the World Bank reserves for the US dollar went from 61% to 62.9% during that period of time. So you can mark Porter Stansberry's words that he was wrong. Now, also in 2014, he warned of a collapse of the US dollar to start to occur around July 1st, 2014 because of something called FATCA, which is a reporting problem that the U.S. government is causing banks around the world and its residents or citizens who bank around the world. Anyway, I denounced that, said it wasn't going to be the end of the dollar then, and I was right. So it should be clear that Porter Stansberry made a bunch of predictions, economic ones, that didn't come to pass. Does that show he's not a prophet? Yes, he's not a prophet. He made these specific economic predictions and said, mark my words, are going to happen. He was wrong. Now, but does that mean he's a nut? No. As a financial writer, his timing's off. And as far as I can tell, he simply doesn't seem to look at the Bible to decide what he wants to teach. Now, is he correct that disaster is going to come to the United States? Yes. Now, is this disaster serious? Yes. Now, the Bible has an end-time prophecy. It's got to do with finances, actually. It says those who see this should run. So let me go to the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2. I'm going to read a couple of verses here. If you'd like, you can follow along. I'm going to be reading from the New King James Version of the Bible. Starting verse 2, Habakkuk 2. Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, it will not lie. So the end time prophecy is supposed to be made clear, plain so people will get it, and they should run because this is a serious prophecy. So what is this prophecy about? Debt accumulation. So let's go to verses 6 through 8 of Habakkuk 2. Will not all these take up a proverb against him, and a taunting riddle against him, and say, woe to him who increases, what is not his, how long? And to him who loads himself with many pledges, will not your creditors rise up suddenly? Will they not awaken who oppress you, and you will become their booty? Because you plundered many nations, all the remnant of the people shall plunder you. Now the United States is the most indebted nation of all time. This was not an ancient prophecy for the little area called Judah or Israel, as it's called now. Israel does not have a bunch of enemy creditors, but the United States does. Many are taking steps to replace the dollar. Not all of these steps are going to work, but eventually the dollar will be replaced. And Porter Stansberry's issues, he's got his timing off because he doesn't rely on Scripture. But make no mistake about it, the United States is losing its economic dominance. The United Kingdom lost its, and the USA is in the process of losing its now. Now, we in the Continuing Church of God strive to always rely on the Bible. I'd like to read 2 Peter 1, verse 19 from the Old King James Version. We have also a more sure word of prophecy, whereunto you do well that you take heed, as unto a light that shineth in a dark place, until the day dawn and the day star rise in your hearts. A new world order will replace the USA. The dominance the United States and the UK have had for centuries over the world economy is going to go away. However, when that happens, the United States will not be treated right. Porter Stansberry's got that right. I think it's going to be worse than he said. There are prophecies about destruction coming to the debtor, which I read in Habakkuk 2. There's also a prophecy about destruction coming to the strongest military power on the earth, which is the United States. I'm not going to read this now, but it's in Daniel 11, verse 39. That being said, the Bible does not say that the Eurasians who are getting together are going to become the dominant economic force in the world. It does say, however, that they will get together militarily and that they will prosper for a time under the European beast power that will come and is starting to rise up right now. So, is the US dollar going to be abandoned in the fall of 2015? Don't think so. That seems pretty much unlikely. Might the IMF include the Chinese renminbi yuan in their special drawing rights? Yes, they might, or at least they might put out some preconditions to make that happen. Is Porter Stansberry right that the dollar at some point in time is going to lose its world reserve currency status? Yes, but it's not quite yet. But that doesn't mean we should wait until the end. We should consider what the Bible teaches and believe what it says and realize that the current world order with the US and Anglo-Saxon descended allies like the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand pretty much being on the top is not going to last. Your Bible has these warnings. Read again what it says in the book of Habakkuk, because these things you're supposed to know and they will come to pass. This is Dr. Bob Thiel for the Bible News Prophecy Channel.